Welcome to this advanced e-learning training. In this training session, we are going to enhance the View Equipment app that it was created on the Foundation e-learning. So, let's go into the app designer and copy the application into a version 2. And to do that, we just need to open the application. Then we need to go to the menu and choose the copy. And on the dialog, we just need to set the application name. Let's call it zViewEquipment_v2. And let's press save. Now that we have the application, let's activate and rearrange the screen in order to have more space in the center. So let's start by recapping the filtering that we did on the application. Let's search for the search field. Let's open the live change. And in here we have the code that we applied for filtering the list. Let's go into the code snippets and insert the filter code again. So let's go into the SAP UI5. Let's then deep dive into the sap.m.list/sap.m.tree, and in there we have the filters. Let's choose. So the first thing that we normally need to do is to get the bindings that we have for the items on the list. Then we can create multiple filters. As you can see, we have the new .m.ui.model.filter, and we have three parameters that we need to pass. The first one is the variable that we want to filter. The second one is the operation, and the third one is the value itself. We can combine multiple filters in and or combinations. These combinations can contain multiple operators like between, contains, and with, equal, greater or equal, greater than, less or equal, less than, not equal, or starts with something. So let's clear this code. And as you can see, in our case, we are doing a OR filtering, meaning that we first check if the name contains something or if the part number contains something. Let's do a quick test. So I'm typing an O and nothing happens because the three lines contains the letter O. Now I will put a Y, and as you can see, it now filters for the first one, because this is the only one that contains the O and the Y together. And in this case, we are using the contain, meaning that it's going to search by the letters that we put in the full length of the words to see if it finds a match. Now let's go on and check the filtering that we are doing on the O segmented button filtering. In this case, we have a segmented button with three items inside. The first one is the all. We have the all on the key, as you can see. The second one is the assigned, and in the key we have assigned. And the third one is the unassigned, and in the key we have unassigned. The code is applied on the O segmented button filtering selection change. Let's have a look. So if we have the selected key all, we are applying the remove filtering function. If we have the assigned, we call the function show assigned. If we have the unassigned key, we call the function show unassigned. Let's have a look to these three functions. So on the remove filtering, we are getting the bindings from the equipment list and applying an empty filtering to remove all filterings. On the show assigned, we are also getting the binding from the equipment list, and we are applying a filtering on the assigned underscore for checking And in this case, we want to apply the operation equal because we want to check if it's equal to true. Then we need to pass this filter to the bindings. On the show and assign it, we are doing exactly the same as we did on the show assign it, but instead of checking for the true, we are checking for the false. So let's go on. Now let's improve the responsiveness of the application. If you reduce the screen size, as you can see, the search bar starts to be over the segmented buttons. So we want to hide the search bar if the screen size is too small. And to do that, let's choose the search field. Let's search for the property style class visibility and choose the option visible only on desktop. This means that the search field is only visible on a desktop. Let's activate the application. And as you can see, now the search field is no longer visible because the screen size is smaller than a desktop. Let's run the application in a standalone mode. And as you can see, now the search bar is visible. Let's enable the developer tools. And now you don't see anymore the search bar because we are mimicking a tablet. Let's disable the option to mimic a tablet. And now, as you can see, we have the search bar. If I reduce the size, it will disappear. You can check the screen sizes by going into the sap.m.screen_sizes. As you can see, you have the dimensions for all types of screens here. As we can see, the desktop is 1024, so if I start dragging, as soon as I'm over the 1024, the search bar appears. Now let's go into the app designer and change the property to hide on tablet. Let's activate the application and test the behavior. If we start reducing the screen size, as soon as we reach the tablet size, the search bar disappears. This type of configuration may have an issue because if you go below the tablet size, meaning that if you go into a phone size, the search bar is going to appear again. And this may interfere visually on the application because in this case the search bar is going to be overlapping the buttons. Now let's go on and change visually our list. In this case, we want to use a grid layout. Let's jump into the SAP documentation to check the component. Let's open an example so you can have a better understanding. So in this case, we want to use something like this grid layout. If we reduce the screen size, as you can see, this component is fully responsive, meaning that it's going to adjust depending on the screen size. So let's jump into the app designer and start dragging the grid list and the grid list item into the scroll container. Now that we have dragged the list and the list item, let's see what we want to build. So we are going to have our list and inside we are going to have our list item. This is the aspect that we want to achieve. Then we are going to have a VBox that it's going to be used to align all the components vertically. And inside the VBox, we are going to have an HBox to align the icon on the center. And below that, we are going to have our title equipment. And below that, we are going to have the check-in label and the assigned to label. Now let's go on and start dragging some components. So the first one that we need to drag is the VBox. Then let's drag the HBox. Now let's drag the icon and put it inside the HBox. Let's go on and drag the title. Let's put it above the H box for now. Let's drag both labels. Now let's move the H box above the title. Let's start with the configuration of the component. So let's go to the title. Let's rename to title equipment. Let's rename the first label to label check-in. And let's rename the second one to label assigned to. For now, let's keep the old list here. Let's just rename to equipment list underscore old, so we don't have a duplicated name. Let's go into our grid list and change the name to equipment list. Let's activate the application. As you can see, we have data on the second list, but we don't have anything on the new list because we didn't set the model. So let's do it. Let's choose the equipment table. Let's activate the application. We still don't see any data. Let's check the reason for that. Let's go into the Ajax get underscore equipment. Let's open the model. And as you can see, we don't have the checkbox ticked to receive the table into the equipment list. Let's tick the checkbox and activate the application. Now we can see 4 empty squares. This means that we have data on the list. Now we just need to build the layout to show the data. Now that we already have the list with data, let's disable the old one. And for that we just need to tick the checkbox saying disable. Let's activate, and as you can see, now we only have one list. Let's start to do the bindings. So on the source of the icon, we want to bind the assigned for checking. Let's also copy the formatter from the old object list item to the icon source. Let's activate the application. And now we can see that we have the icon on the left upper corner. But right now is showing a small icon. So let's increase the size to 3 rems. Let's activate the application. And now we have a big icon. Let's go on and change the color of the icon depending on the assigned for checking. So let's bind the variable to the color property and apply a formatter. In the formatter, we want to have the following logic. So if the assigned for checking is equal to true, we want to set the color as black. Otherwise, we are going to set the color as gray. Let's activate the application, and as you can see, we have 2 blacks and 1 gray. Let's go on and start configuring the title. On the title, we want to show 2 variables, the part number and the name. So let's choose both of them and press the bind and concatenate. Let's go to the old object list and copy the formatter for the title into the title component. Let's activate and preview the app, and now we can see the title below the icon. On the label check-in, we want to bind the property text to the variable days until checked. So let's do that. And let's also copy the formatter from the old object list item into the new label. Once again, let's activate and preview, and we have the label. But we only see the days. So let's put some text before the days. Let's go into the formatter and add check-in before the days until check variable. Let's preview again, and now we have the label before the days. Let's go to the second label. In this one, we want to bind the text to the assigned to. So let's choose that variable, and let's copy the formatter from the old object list item into the label. Let's activate and preview, and now we have the icon, the title, and the two labels. Now let's start aligning the component. So let's align the icon to the center. So let's go into the H box and change the property justify content to center. Let's activate, and as you can see, now the icon is centered. Additionally, let's put a small gap between the H box and the title. So let's go into the H box, let's search for the property style class margin, and let's choose a small margin on bottom. Let's activate. Now let's do the same, but let's put on the top of the icon. So let's choose the icon. Let's search for the style class margin, and this time let's choose the tiny margin on top. Let's activate the application, and now as you can see we have a gap all around. Now let's increase the size between the cells. So let's jump into the developer tools. Let's select the component between the cells. This is the grid list item, and as you can see we have here the UL. This means that this is an order list. To better understanding the layout of the application, let's deep dive into the analysis of the DOM elements. So our app starts on the O shell. As you can see, we have the same element on the DOM. If you expand this, you will find the O app inside it. Now let's expand the O app and we can find the page immediately inside it. Now let's expand the page and we have three areas, the header, the section and the footer. In this case, our component, the scroll container, is on the section, so let's expand it. Now let's expand the scroll container once more and we have the list. Let's expand the list, and inside it we have our unordered list. Let's expand it, and as you can see we have all the items inside there. Now let's go on and create the style class that we want to apply in order to space all the items inside the unordered list. So let's open the style sheet and let's start coding. So we have created the equipment list class and we want to apply this class only on the unordered list elements. In this class we want to change the grid template columns. We want to have the same size for all the columns and we want to increase the gap to 3 rams. Now let's add the class in the grid. Let's search for the style class, and it seems that our grid list doesn't have the style class property. So we will need to do this by code. This will depend on the Neptune version where you are working. You may have this property available on your version. So let's do the code to apply the style on the grid list. Let's open the function. Let's go into the attach init and let's put there equipment list.add style class and pass the class name. Let's activate the application. Let's refresh, and as you can see now we have a big gap between the columns. Now let's create a style class to be applied on the items inside the columns. We also have the same issue on the grid list item. We don't have a way to assign the class. So let's do in the same way as we did for the grid list. Let's put here grid list item dot add style class and pass the name of the class. Let's create the equipment list item. Now let's jump into the style sheet and create the class. In this class we have a small margin of 0.5 RAM. We also have a padding all around of 2 rams. We have a small animation, a transition that it's going to take 0.3 seconds. We have a display flex and the flex direction as column. Let's activate the application and refresh the browser to see the changes. Now, as you can see, we have a gap all around. Let's go on. Let's enhance the style class. Let's create a dependency when the mouse is over. So let's copy the name of the class and let's put a column over. And let's change the background color to gray when the mouse is over the cell. Let's activate and refresh the browser. And as you can see, we have a light gray when the mouse is over the cell. We didn't need to add a second style class to the items because we used the same one and we created a dependency. You can have multiple dependencies on one class. Now let's go on and add a style class to the label check-in. This time let's use the property style class. Let's create the equipment description. This time we want to bind this style class to the SAP label. So let's put a .SAP label after the name of the style class. Inside we want to transform the text to uppercase. So let's use the property text-transform and the value uppercase. Normally you have a class that is the same as the name of the component without the dots. Let's jump into the developer tools and check this. So if you select a label, you will see that you have on the class SAP label. Let's choose one of the segmented buttons and as you can see we have SAP seg buttons. In this case the name is slightly different. So the best approach is always to check first. Let's activate the application and refresh the page. As you can see, now the label is in uppercase. Now, if we resize the screen, you can see that we can have a big gap because the other cell doesn't fit yet, so that's why it's not moving there. So let's create a style class to change the gap between columns depending on the screen size. So let's code it. In this case, we are going to use the media query and we are going to query for the max width. So if the max width is below 1024 pixels, we want to apply a column gap of 0.5 rem. So just let's copy the same that we have on the line 1 and change the column gap to 0.5. Let's activate and refresh the page. Now, if we change the screen size, as you can see, we have a small gap, and as soon as we reach the 1024 pixels, the gap changes to 3 rems. Now let's go on and implement the press event. We have the same issue as the style class on this component. We don't have the press event, so we need to do this by code. So first thing first, let's change the type of the grid list item to active. Now let's go into the function and implement our code. So we need to put grid list item dot attach press, and inside the brackets let's put function, and inside the function let's put the O event. Now let's copy the code from the press event of the old list into this one. Let's double check if everything is correct. Let's activate and refresh the app. Now let's press in the items, and as you can see, we are able to navigate. So let's jump into the designer and configure our last step. We want to show a color on the side of the cell in order to be easier to identify the inspections that need to be performed. And for that, we are going to use the highlight in the grid list item. So let's copy the expression binder that we use on the other list into this one. So we want to check if the days until check is bigger than 1. If yes, we apply the success, otherwise we apply an error. For additional information on the expression binding, you can check the documentation on the SAP UI5 web page and search for expression binding. Now let's activate our application and see the result. As we can see, we have a red and a green. The ones that are overdue are in red, the other ones are in green. And with this, we conclude our training session. Looking forward to see you on the next one.